Okay, the game we're going to be taking a look at is I Am Spartacus, the Slave Rebellion against Rome, 73 BC. It appeared in the March-April issue of Command Magazine, 1992. The designer was Mike Markowitz. It's an area movement game, not a lot of counters, which is nice, and we're just going to take a look at it and tell you a little bit about this game and how it played. Now, if you check the ancient sources like Tacitus or Polybius or something, or Plutarch, you're going to find precious little on the rebellion itself. In fact, you can't find much modern literature on just the Spartacus rebellion, although I did pick up this one by Barry Strauss. I was curious because I was wondering how could he get a book-length treatment on this one rebellion. But it is quite good, pictures illustrated. If you want to read more about Spartacus, I can certainly recommend that book. I think in the 20th century, a lot of us remember Spartacus mainly because of the motion picture made by Kirk Douglas's company, and it was directed by Stanley Kubrick. Later on, they made a made-for-TV movie, big 3-hour thing, and it was quite good. And later, the Australians, on their Stars channel, made a mini-series on Spartacus, stretching out the story for many seasons. So I think that's why we know it so well in the 20th century. Let's take a look, though, at the game, I Am Spartacus, see what this is all about. For those of you who watch my other videos, you know I'm always making knocks against the magazine games. But there are some good magazine games out there, and this is one of them. And I think it's because this game knows its limits. It takes advantage of the magazine format in the sense that it doesn't have a lot of counters. The density is quite low. For example, at the beginning of the scenario, we've got a legion up here in Aquileia, one here at Mutina. You've got the city cohorts of Rome, another couple of legions here at Neapolis, and just off at the Straits of Messina, there's another legion. So the counter density is low. You get this little bag of counters here, but those are mainly step reduction units for the legions when they take losses. You've got the slave units, little bag of those, not too many. And then you've got these trained gladiator units, which replace the slave units as Spartacus's army gets better. As you can see, it's an area movement game, so movement is simply from area to area, or area to sub-area when there's this little circle, like Vesuvius. You've got Rome itself, the Pontine Marshes, which you don't really want to get into, and the Scylla Forest, and towns like Brundisium, and way up in the north there, Aquileia. So movement is quite simple, area to area. Now the Spartacus rebellion began at the gladiator school in Capua in Campania. So that's the way the game sets up. The rebellion starts here, and as the Spartacus player, you're trying to expand this rebellion into other areas, recruit a slave army, and as you get in combat and get prowess, your army is going to get better, and you can replace it with these gladiator counters. Of course, for Rome, the opposite is true. What they want to do is suppress this rebellion before it gets any larger. Now, historically, the rebellion, I think, lasted about 2 or 3 years. The slave army run amok all through Roman territory, burning farms and stuff like that, and just causing chaos. And, of course, Rome had to pull in their legions from afar to put down the rebellion. This is your turn record. Each turn represents about a month. It starts here in November, turn 2, 3, 4, and you can see when reinforcements come in, all for the Roman player, of course. So it took time for the Romans to muster enough forces to put down this rebellion, but you can see that the game is weighted in favor of the Roman. There's just not much chance of the rebellion ever succeeding. But play balance has never been a big thing for me anyway. I just like the situation, and I'll play the Spartacus player anytime. I don't care what the balance is like. It's just, as long as the game is historical and it's fun to play, I'm fine with that. Now, I won't be giving a detailed account of how the phases work, but suffice to say that at the beginning, it starts in the middle of a phase, and it begins with 5 slave units already in revolt with this gladiator counter and 3 leaders, Crixus, Castus, and of course Spartacus, which I'm amused to see they've made look like Kirk Douglas as he appeared in the film. Now, opposed to them are potentially 2 legions, the first and second. And I'll do the opening turn here and see what some of the options are, and you'll be able to see a little bit about how the game works. Now, when you set up the game, you take away the mounted Spartacus units, the slingers, separate the pirates, and then the slave army too. You separate them. And you put the rest of the units in a pool. And that's the way Spartacus will eventually raise his army. Now, as I mentioned, that's the way turn 1 starts. The rebellion has already occurred. The Spartacus army has just been formed, and we begin with the Roman reaction to that rebellion. I'll take a look at the options and see what they can do. Now, the whole board is controlled by the Roman player. All the provinces, towns are Roman, except Campania, where the revolt has broken out. Let's see what the Romans can do. Okay, for the purposes of the video, I'll probably do something that I don't think I would normally do. But let me show you what some of the options are. Now, if the Romans march out into the countryside and try to put down the rebellion, Spartacus and his army could try to evade. That means they would leave the province and not do battle. That's one option. Now, if they failed, then there would be battle. Or another option would be the Romans march out into the countryside and the Spartacus army immediately accepts battle. So for the purposes of the video, excuse me, for the purposes of the video, I'll have them march out into the countryside and Spartacus will accept battle. And when you see how battle works, you might see that that isn't the optimum move. Now, the die might make a liar out of me, but let's just see how this goes. Personally, I don't think I would sally out with the Roman legions yet, but historically, the Romans did want to put down the rebellion as quickly as possible, and in a rash move, that's probably what they did. But let's go to the battle board and see what happens. Now, I've made up this little battle board here, but it is not necessary for play. What you do is you line up your troops opposite each other. The side with the fewer troops lines up first, and then the player with more troops lines up opposite them. And you're going to fight on a 1-to-1 battle by rolling the die, and you're going to want to get equal to or lower than your die roll to hit the enemy opponent. And each unit fires only once per turn. If a unit has a leader under them, you get to add a -1 from the dice. So we'll start the battle with the first legion fighting the first wave of Spartacus. The legion rolls, and they get a 4, so they get a hit on the Spartacus unit, which kills it. Now the Spartacus unit fires back. It's got a 1, 2, or 3, so there's a hit on the first legion. Now there are step reduction counters, so I'll put one of those down. Okay, checking the rules, I made a real faux pas here. Spartacus is actually killed because he was with the first frontline unit that was destroyed. So, rule of thumb, don't have your leader in the front line. And the first corps did take a reduction. So we've got this battle between the gladiators here under Castus. And he'll probably hit. Yes, he does. And the second legion will fire, and he hits. So we'll reduce them and follow up. Now when a unit is destroyed, the next unit in line moves up under Crixus here, like so. And we go for a second round. So Crixus will fire. He actually adds 1 to the morale of the unit. So it's 1, 2, or 3, and he hits. And he does hit the First Legion. First Legion fires back. He needs to get 5 or less. And he gets a hit too. Okay, that means Crixus was killed. So I'm not doing too well here. And the First Legion was reduced also. So in this battle, the Second Legion will fire. Rolls. And he misses. And Castus will fire. And he misses. So we go on to a third round. First against the slaves. They get a hit. The slave is destroyed. And the slave unit will fire. Combat is simultaneous. And he gets a miss. So we've got a Roman breakthrough here, which is not too good. Second Legion will fire. Gets a 3 and gets a hit. Gladiators will go down. And they get a miss. So I'll set it up, and I think the slaves are defeated. Okay, that's the situation after the round of combat, and I've just looked up the rules. The gladiators can attempt to break off, but this game is almost lost right here in turn 1, so that's not a good opening for the gladiators. If those legions engage with them, they should try to break off right away. Let's do a tactical break off here. I get a 1, 2, or 3, and I think that's successful. Nope, that would actually be a rout result. So I'll end this combat here. I wanted to show you a typical opening, and like I said, that's not an opening I would have chosen because the gladiators have more or less lost the whole campaign here in turn 1. So for future games, when the 2 legions sally out, you might want to get the heck out of Dodge, leave Campania, and retreat into Lucania. So what I'll do is I'll just reset the video here, as if Spartacus and his boys successfully evaded and went into Lucania. That's the only way you'll be able to see how this game really works. Okay, so we're going to redo that turn 1, just as if Spartacus and his army are trying to evade. And they roll a 3, which means they successfully evade. Now, it doesn't actually say in the rules what you do when you evade. And since it's silent, I assume you just don't have combat. So we're at the end of the phase. The Roman legions are out in the countryside with Spartacus. We'll go on to the next phase and see what happens. Well, actually nothing happens. So we go on to game turn 2, December, and it says replacement and upgrade. So we'll see what those phases are all about. Okay, in this case here, there will be no replacements because Spartacus did not lose any units, nor did the Roman legions, since there was no battle. Now, Spartacus's army does not control Campania, nor does the Roman. Now, had Spartacus controlled the province, he would have been able to add 1 more slave unit to his force. But that's not the case here. So now I'm understanding a little bit more of the mechanics of what Spartacus wants to do. What he wants to do is roam around the countryside and get this slave army going. So that's probably what he'll do. You want to keep these provinces in revolt, raise your slave army, and eventually make this slave army more powerful. Because 2 legions aren't going to be able to cut it against Spartacus's army if he gets much larger. The next phase that's going to affect our game would be the attrition phase. Now, as it turns out, the Romans are fine because they've got a supply line to Neapolis. But Spartacus has got to live off the land, so he's got to roll a die to see if any of his units are eliminated. So they have to roll on the attrition table, and they get a 1, which is fortunate for Spartacus. It means no losses. Okay, the action part of the turn begins with Spartacus, so the rebel army moving. Now, checking the rules, what you want to do is get your leaders into as many areas as possible, because it's leaders that cause possible units or provinces to rebel. So The rebels have 3 leaders, so they're going to divide up into 3 different forces, go into areas, and try to get them to rebel. Okay, at this point, it's a little risky to do forced marching for the slave army. So Spartacus and Castus went into Lucania, and Crixus went into the mountains here, the Herpinia Mountains. And we'll be rolling for rebellions here to see if any more slaves join the rebellion. Okay, if Spartacus is present, he gets to add 2 to the die, and that's how many slave units will be raised. He rolls a 4, which really becomes a 6. That means 6 new slave units will be added to his army. That's going to be kind of nice, and will give the Romans a bit of a headache. All right, now Crixus gets to roll, but he's in mountainous country, and he's actually got to subtract 3 from the dice, so it's not too likely he's going to raise too many forces there. Let's see what he gets. He gets a 1, so nobody's raised there. So that's the movement phase for the slave army. Now, learning from the experience of turn 1 there, I suppose these 2 legions could pursue Spartacus into Lucania, although his army is much bigger now. But I think they'll be content to stay in Campania and put down the revolt. It's a long game, and I think the Romans have got to play for the long game. They're not enjoying seeing this rebellion get larger, but I think that's the best move they can do right now. Just stand pat and put down that revolt. Okay, we would advance to turn 3 and begin the whole process all over again. Okay, we have a new step here, the pacification step, but this will be virtually automatic for the Romans here. What they do is roll a die and add the combat strength of the units in there, and they have to get a 7 or greater, so that's going to be automatic. Roll the die, and the revolt in Campania is crushed. You flip it over, and you get this awful crucifixion marker here showing you that the slave rebellion there has been suppressed. In this phase, leaders would be recovered, and the Spartacus player would roll for the Cilician pirates, but I don't think they have a possibility of coming in, so I won't bother with that. Then there's this replacement and upgrade step, and it's only done in the first month of each new season. That's not the case here. We're still actually in this winter turn of turn 3. So I'm going to fast forward the game to turn 5 just to show you what happens when you do upgrade the rebel army. Now I've just leaped ahead here to show you what Spartacus and the boys could be doing. They would go into new areas, of course, and try to cause the provinces to be in revolt. Since there's no Roman units there, they would do so. Spartacus would roll for his new men, add 2, so he'd get 5 new slave units here. So you can see in no time at all, the slave army can get mighty big. Castus, Crixus here, they'd roll for Apulia, and they would get 40 units. So they're almost at their capacity for slave units. Now during this phase, they would be allowed to upgrade 2 slave units. What they would do is you'd take off 2 slave units from the board. In this case, we'll take it off of Spartacus's army here. You remove 2 of them, and then you draw randomly from this pool 2 units randomly. And he gets their Thracian unit, which now has a combat factor of 5, and a Syrian unit, which has a combat factor of 3. So you can see in time, the slave army is going to get rather formidable in number of units and in combat prowess. Now, with that, I'm going to wrap up the video just to show you, how the game is played. So you've got this dance where the slave army is roaming over the countryside, raising units, getting more powerful, and the powerful Roman legions, not very many of them, are going to try to spread out and stamp this thing down. And of course, in time, the Romans will bring enough power to bear. That's late in the game. Turn 10, turn 13, turn 16. You've got winter turns in between where attrition can be a factor. New units can be replaced and upgraded. It's a great little game for showing you the Spartacus rebellion and how it could have spread. Now, this game has been out of print, of course, for years, but I've got some good news. Compass Games is going to reprint this game as a double bill. They're redoing it this year. The name of the game is still going to be I Am Spartacus, but it's going to be double billed with another game called Alexandros, and it will be in one package. So you'll get 2 games in one box. So that's something to look out for if you're interested in this game. So that's it for I Am Spartacus, and thank you for watching.